Hello everyone, welcome to the Social Agency Hangout. This week
Hi, Louis.
And hello Bill, welcome back to England. This week's one is called A Postcard from America, and Bill will be taking us through some of the trends, technologies, events and so forth that he's been seeing in America in the recruitment sector. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, if you'd like to come and join their hangout, you can come onto Google, add me into a circle. You should be able to join in, or add Bill. Tweet hashtag SocialAgency if you want to make any comments. I'll pass them on. Same on LinkedIn, and there's a number of groups all over the place you can join and post to as well. Bill, tell me what you've been doing.
What I've been doing, well, I've been sitting on a lot of planes and doing a lot of miles is one thing. But we've had over the last 2 weeks, I was in San Francisco for a week. So I went to see about 12 of the new technology product companies. I also attended Lucian Tarnowski's engagement party. A lot of people know Lucian or remember Lucian from the space from Brave New Talent. And on top of that, I then hosted True San Francisco, where we had about 130 people in San Francisco at the Smart Recruiters HQ. I was then at covering for Dice.com and Open Web the Recruiting Rockstar Tour, which involved 2 days at the Recruiting Innovation Summit, which is an ERE event, which also has new technology competitions, best in-house recruiting department, and all this kind of stuff. And then I also then hosted, went to the California Staffing Professionals (CSP) State Conference in Newport as guests of my friends at Broadbean, and we ran a True OC, or True Orange County, as it became renowned, True Bean, in Newport for 1 day, and then spoke at 2 of the events or spoke at 2 events in Orange County. Orange County did 2 keynotes there, and then went down to New York for True New York.
Right, okay.
And did a bit of training as well. So it's been quite a few miles and a lot of time.
In 2 weeks?
Yeah, I've probably met with and spoken to about 350 recruiting and technology professionals over the last 2 weeks. So it's given me a good handle for what's really going on in the market.
So are these events a mix of recruiters, corporate recruiters, third party?
You get a real mix. So you get corporate recruiters, third party and agency. And you then get people who are around the space. So they might be technologists who are building technology, technology companies, quite a lot of startups, obviously, particularly around San Francisco, and some exciting stuff there. And I've met job seekers who are looking for things. We've done a bit of mystery shopping for a couple of products. We've gone out and done some interviews and applied for some process. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind and a cram tour.
Okay, fantastic. I guess one of the questions I was going to ask is what are the main differences you're seeing compared to Europe and Britain specifically in terms of technology, recruitment strategies? I've only been to True London. Is there a lot of difference? I think
so. I think when you go to any city, it has kind of a unique feel. The topics might look very similar, and conversation might look quite similar, but you get local issues, and you also get different feels according to the industries of areas. So when you think about the world, I mean, if we just think about it in UK terms. If you were running an event in Leeds or Manchester or Newcastle or London or Bristol, it's going to be quite different because it's dictated by the local landscape, the local economy and the local industry and what their particular sector problems are. And the same is true. So in San Francisco, it was very much new startups, real heavy talk on technology and technology companies. In New York, by comparison, yes, there's some technology companies, lot of finance. We ran the event actually just off Wall Street, so a lot of finance companies and insurance companies, and the challenges that they face in those sectors. In Orange County, because it was part of the California Staffing Professionals, it was an entirely third-party and agency recruiters, about 80 of those. So that then had more of an agency slant. So you get, it's a cross-section as always, really.
Okay, and you mentioned in your article, you're talking about, the article that was put up in relation to this hangout, you're talking about some trends over there in sourcing candidates online, in intelligent technology. You're talking about the move into a lot of hiring managers taking up direct sourcing and moving away.
I think that's probably the most interesting trend right now that we're seeing it, and it's coming out in 3 different ways, and it's actually been confirmed also that the same things are coming back from the technology companies, and the technology companies are seeing it in terms of who's actually buying their tech, who's buying, particularly the sourcing tech. And what we're seeing is 3 things really. I think it started with something that came out of the Candidate Experience Awards, both in the US and the UK, that more and more hiring managers are being held accountable for hiring within their team, whereas historically they might have passed it off. So the way it would end up with a third-party recruiter is it would be passed off to a recruiting department. A recruiting department would then go to their SLA or whatever technology they're working on, and they'd flip it back and say, let's put it out to an agency. And every time it got passed on, there was little attention to the actual ownership of who owns this, who's doing what. What's happening now, or what we're seeing quite dramatically, really, is more and more hiring managers are being held accountable. Now that means they get a lot more involved in the process. There's 3 different ways of that. Hiring managers actually needing to draw up job descriptions, hiring managers being involved in the sourcing process. Reason for that, if we actually look at data, some of the data coming out of the States, if you're a hiring manager, you actually see 5 applicants in 1,000. Right, that's a big number. But by the time the candidates have gone through the ATS, gone through the sifting system, been sorted out, gone to a recruiter who's done their 2nd or 3rd set of sifting, there might be some tests applied and things like that. They're ending up with about 5 people. They say we're just not seeing the right volume or shortlist or increase of quality. There's also the issue that a lot of the, certainly in the technical sector, a lot of the jobs are very new jobs that didn't exist before, and to actually hire for those jobs requires a good degree of technical knowledge, and there is a question about whether recruiters are well equipped to deal with that, or whether it should actually be hiring managers. Now, the other thing you're getting back from that is a big drive on hiring from referrals. So a referred candidate, if we look at the UK Candidate Experience Awards, a referred candidate is 4 times more likely to be hired than a general applicant. So that means lots of companies are looking at referrals and saying, well, actually, if we're looking at referrals, we're wanting to push that individually within teams. So the best person to drive it isn't the hiring manager. And then we've got the whole employer brand issue, which is where the organisations or within the organisation outside of recruiting, there's content and connections being made between people who work inside the organisation, people who work outside in a similar job role. So all of this activity is pointing towards kind of small sourcing units with no speciality and accountability with the hiring managers, and less with the recruiter. And that really poses a lot of challenges when we look at recruiters thinking about well, okay, what are the recruiters going to do? First off, we're going to say, well, there's really 2 directions a recruiter can go in. Now, how I see that, if this trend continues at the rate that it is, I think one of the things we're going to see is that the recruiting teams are actually going to be shrinking. So there's going to be less people actually direct recruiting. We're going to see we'll see a change of focus. So a senior talent acquisition professional will be becoming a lot more strategic and less tactical. It will be less about hands-on recruiting from the recruiting team, and adding more of a consultancy, almost in an HR type function, where you're supporting the activity with strategic advice and direction, which comes down to looking at the function and saying, well, actually, are we equipped to do that? Do we have the knowledge? Are we collecting data? Are we working like consultants? Are we working as transactional hiring managers? I think it would mean recruiters spending a lot less time in the hiring process. If we look at some of the data that came out of last week, it actually takes 75 candidates to fill a job, 75 applicants to fill a job in the UK, 85 in the US to actually fill a job, and the average in-house recruiter is handling about 30 recs at any one time, so 30 requirements. So you do the math on that and figure out 30 times 85, how many people you've got in a massive pipeline. It's impossible to do anything but chance, accidentally stumble across the right candidate. So I think there's a rethink going in around that and saying, actually, what we should be doing, if we're going to be looking at talent communities, talent networks, all these new kinds of thinking, perhaps what we should be doing is saying, let's get our sourcing done internally. Recruiters can be more strategic around what's going on and training hiring managers to do that and assisting them with that process, or they're going to become more administrative with less of the hands-on recruiting responsibility on a day-to-day basis, and more a case of, well, you coordinate the interviews, you sort that stuff out.
Well, okay, and you mentioned technology and specifically the innovative technology coming out of the US. How's that coming into all of this? So are these solutions to these problems?
Well, if we start off from a sourcing point of view, it makes finding easier. I actually think the easier finding is, the harder recruiting is. So the easier it is to find the candidates, the harder the process becomes, because everybody is. So you then have to be a bit more imaginative and say, where do we find people? But if I talk about some specific sourcing technologies and where they sit, and how that will then, how that will in turn sit with recruiting and people doing hiring, you've got very specific finding technology like Guild, which is G-I-L-D, not G-U. I think when you posted my article up, it didn't spell check.
Oh, right.
So Guild is
Sorry.
away. That's all right. It's Guild, which is G-I-L-D. Guild sources from open source code. So it sources in places like Stack Overflow, GitHub, and all these kind of places where developers are posting code.
Right, okay.
And so then what Guild will do is source people by code, and all programmers sign code with an email, which is usually their most accurate email. So from code, you can do two things with code when you find it. You can assign it to a person by their email address and collect other social information to build a profile on them. You can assign a score to that code, so you can actually look at it and say, this is based on this programmer has 200 different code strings published in open source. This is their score, because there's a scoring algorithm around how good their code actually is. So this is their score, and you can benchmark people on their capability. You get an email address that you go out and get social information. So you can source people through code. That's obviously a technical thing, but that's one of the products. The second product, which is quite an interesting one, is called Entello.
Yep.
Entello enables you to source, and you can do it really in any niche, but it sources from social data. So it brings together a social profile based on content, but then when you're sourcing for people, it ranks them according to external data as well, like the type of activity they're doing, the sentiment of their content that they're posting in recruit circles, and it also looks at guess is on things like external news and data. So, for example, if you've got a company whose share price has gone down, or there's some negative news around their CEO or anything like that, it will rank them higher in the search algorithm, because it will say, you know, based on what we know about the company they work for, this candidate is most likely to be in the market and looking.
Okay. And the next one you mentioned, Dice Open Web.
Yeah, Dice Open Web. Well, from the UK, we're going to be pretty familiar with this. Dice Open Web is Social CV. Bill Fisher's company,
yes,
which came out of London. Yeah. Dice Open Web sold Dice to Bill Fisher. Sorry, the other way around. Bill Fisher sold the social recruiting technology to Dice, I think, for around $20 million. So it was quite a nice deal. And what they've done is put Open Web into a job board. So I think this is quite an interesting trend or take that we're going to be seeing, whereby what Dice are doing is putting sourcing technology within a job board. So say we have 4 channels within the job board in which you can find people, and Dice.com is a very good example for people to go and have a look at for something innovative. The 4 channels are: we have a traditional job board, with jobs posted. We have a database. They then have niche talent communities, which are more content communicate, and they're genuine communities because they have 360-degree connections. And then we have Open Web, which is a sourcing product which lets you go search anywhere on the web and gather together social information. What it also does is it integrates and ranks those candidates if they've also got a Dice profile in one of the communities, or if Dice have a resume, or what they call a resume, CV, I should remember, for the UK audience. If they find a CV or resume, it links together social data to say, here it is. So that's a pretty, I think what's
does
really...
does that integrate with CRMs? How does that work?
Yeah, it does, yeah. So it basically means what you're doing is you're operating your recruiting within a job board. So
right, okay.
What you'd consider a job board is becoming your recruiting centre with CRM capability. So that's quite an interesting trend of saying, well, something we've been talking about for a while is, given the amount of traffic, job boards are not dying, but they're starting to look at how do we evolve maybe into something different. You know, do we become an ATS? Do we become a CRM? Do we become a place where people search? And Dice
so
have done
you've got job boards moving towards the sort of all-in-one solution, including, you know, online sourcing, the whole lot as well.
In one place, yeah.
Yeah, which is the same direction CRMs are moving in, I'm guessing.
Exactly right. So it's doing the same stuff and saying do it in the same place, and it's also saying, well, we've got all these people, we've got all this data, we've got to figure out how we use it and how we stay relevant. Yeah.
Okay, and Talent Bin's the 4th one you mentioned.
Talent Bin is a company that we've known for quite a long time. Peter Kazajli's business. I think about 3 years ago it was launched as a referral network. Actually, that's how they built the first database. It's a giant database of people. What they do with Talent Bin is searching for what they call professional data in informal channels. So what we mean by that is things that people are tweeting, things that people are posting, things that people are uploading, things that people are sharing, in which we say, right, we'll take your Twitter feed, we'll take your LinkedIn, we'll take your Facebook, we will filter out everything that we consider to be social in terms of non-professional, and we will create a professional profile for you.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So it gets rid of the noise.
It gets rid of the noise, and it's a sourcing tool, but it takes out what's considered the professional data. And again, like Social CV or Dice Open Web, like Entello, like Guild, they're sourcing across multiple channels and putting that data back to say, let's filter all the noise out, let's put all the interesting information and useful data, and let's try and position it in a different way. So I think what we're getting there when we look at these 4 products, and and there's more coming, I think when we look at these 4 products, they work across cross channels. They each have a bit of a unique take in terms of where they think the value is in terms of sourcing and sourcing technology, but they let people source and find people quite easily.
And are they all targeting the HR hiring manager side? Or are we?
Well, I think like anyone, they'll target anyone who'll buy off them. You know, let's be honest. They'll get anyone who can buy them. Now they're the people. They're the people, among others, who are coming back saying, interestingly, that's where most of their sales inquiries are coming from. That hiring managers are looking to buy sourcing technology. And this is what makes us, and we know at the same time from an HR point of view, at the HR events, that hiring managers are being seen and given a lot more accountability in hiring, because this is where the biggest, this is where the biggest loss is.
Okay. I'll be interested to see third-party recruiters take up this kind of technology.
Well, I think you'll find talent bin is starting to be adopted by quite a few people. They also have a mobile.
In the US or
over here as well? You'll hear people talking about talent bin.
Okay.
And other technologies, and you're going to see more of Guild and Entello.
I think I've heard of Entello, and I've certainly heard of Talent Bin and Social CV. So you move on in your article. You mentioned assessment tools, crowdsourced tests, and so forth.
Yeah, I think this is the really interesting one. This is where the market's going to really change for third-party recruiters. I think this is also something that's quite easy for them to plug into their offering to make it very easy. Now, what's happened is the traditional psychometric or assessment market has required certain things. It's been a very academic market. As a result, companies like SHL and other people have been able to really have a stranglehold on that market in terms of pricing and where they position themselves, because you've always needed to use a scientifically validated test, and you've always been and for which when you booked it, you've needed a paid for administrator, you've needed a paid for person to interpret it, paid for person to apply for it, and you've been spending and spending. Now the result of that, so the result of that is where companies have been positioning assessments and tests has been towards the end of the process, because it's been expensive. You know, if you're paying $1,500, $2,000 a test, you're not going to test every.
No, they test a short list. Yep.
Yeah, you're going to test a short list of 2 or 3 people because of the amount of money you're spending. Now, the other problem you have with these traditional academic tests is the model means they are always devised in terms of what the right answers are, what the correct stuff is, on a mean average of a large focus group. So they'll take a large group of people, large group of professionals who are considered the good employees, or however they do it. They will then be tested and benchmarked to produce the mean average scores, to say this is what the market's doing. And that was really what I'd call the academic score of this is how you do it. You devise a test, you apply it to a large focus group, that gives you a mean average. That's what and then that's what you measure everyone else against to say this is how they are in these different areas. I think because the new assessment technology is built as a social technology, it's constantly updated. So every time someone completes the test, already have the data on their background, you can benchmark it. So you're constantly changing and keeping your mean averages current, rather than it being a historical data point. And the rate at which data is going and people are changing and jobs are changing, a historical data point becomes out of date. You kind of you'd have to go through that. In the old model, you'd have to go through the whole process of re-experimenting. Whereas in this, as soon as somebody goes and completes the test, it goes into the average scores. Okay. And looks at what their background is. And then what you can do over time, very quickly, is you can say, right, okay, people who scored this in this went to interview. People who scored this in that test, they ended up with getting hired. You could begin to build higher data, And then you can start looking at performance data. So once you're bringing people in on an assessment profile, you can then start looking on who's providing the performance that we consider to be good. Let's go away and have a look at their assessments. So we're seeing we're seeing some very clever stuff on that, which is quick and which is front end, because there isn't the white-headed, cone-headed professors involved in the process. There is a science behind it and behind the assessments. You're talking about really bringing the cost down for volume of tests to next to nothing, to the point where it's worth testing everybody on entry point. So there's different products for doing skills tests, psychometric tests. I think the other really interesting testing and assessment bit I saw was in the games and the gamification. I'll talk about a bit in a minute, but that's made it really interesting. So then you've got that other factor of saying, well, actually, if you're going to be using these clever assessment tools, they're not high priced, so you're going to use it at the beginning of the process rather than the end of the funnel. You're going to use it for actually some real selection and influence over selection, because it's low enough priced or available under license, you can apply it to anyone, and you don't need an expert to assess it. I think what we then got out of that when we have a look at these assessment tools is some of the really interesting stuff, which is something some people like Paul Jacobs in New Zealand and so on, and other people have been talking about for a while, is we're developing online games which serve as assessments without the candidate even knowing they're going through a test.
Right. Okay. And they can get within these games the right information and the right
totally
assessment.
Because they're psychometric based. Just as a news flash, one of the guys I met who owns a company called something Cube. I'll post it out and let you see it. His name is Michael Tenenbaum. If anyone wants to connect with him. Michael's a very lively and intelligent individual. He's actually building me an assessment game, which is going to be called How Borman Are You? And that's basically but to give you an example, it's a bit of fun, but it's they're doing a whole assessment in terms of what my brain looks like and how I think.
These are these little Facebook ones where you answer a few questions and it tells you where you stand.
No, these are games. These are pure video games that work on.
Right, really?
Okay. And work on the basis of making it habitual for you to come back and keep doing. There are different types of games. There's one particular type of game I've looked at, but there's 2 or 3 people working and releasing these assessment games. So you go play a game, you have no idea. You have no idea what's gonna pop out, but you go and play a game. The tasks in that game are, or decisions that you need to make within that game, are based on work, simulations, real life things, and then based on how you're scoring a mean average against other people who've been hired and are considered to be successstart recruiters. And actually what you're then doing is, once you've scored a certain number of points, that's when people might start talking to you about job roles.
Okay, and recruitment agencies. Do you see recruitment agencies taking these up? I mean, I guess.
I think they could, and I think they probably should. Whether they will whether they will be brave enough to break out the mold will be interesting. But that's probably what people need to be doing.
Okay, and there's something CRMs again can look at integrating into their technology, I suppose. And
exactly right. I mean, if you think about it, if you're running an agency specialising in, I don't know, oil and gas or accountancy or whatever you're doing, if you can devise a simulation game that attracts people because it's fun, it's viral, they're all built for iPhone, so they're built with all the viral components of being really easy to share, challenge your friends.
Yeah.
Do all this kind of gamification aspect of it, and as people are doing that, as they're achieving certain scores, they're getting invited to say, you know what, come and talk to us. It's not a new concept. I mean, Starbucks have been doing it for a good while in Cityville for their future leaders, their future leaders graduate training program, where you register for a store in Cityville, you do certain tasks to build up the value of your store. But if you are bearing in mind we can take data from elsewhere, if we can have a look at what you are and who you are, that you're in the target audience, look at your score and beyond a certain point, you have an avatar who walks out in the gate and says, come and have a chat to us, or let's go to, if you're interested, you get a little button that comes up at the top, says just click on the screen, let's have a chat, because you've got the right, you're displaying the right skills that we need. I think the other point is this is going to become more important as more people are moving away from academic qualification and the pace of change. They're learning their skills on the job. It's very easy for you to go use things like Checkster or whatever you want to use, whereby you can go back and get social references on people. Very interesting stuff. It's a very interesting time in the market. But if you then say, well, actually, the hiring manager's meeting people for fit and telling them a bit about the job and sending them to see if they're interested, we're doing assessment skills, which maybe takes out that part of the interview that was previously there, and we do it with every candidate so we can benchmark them together. You've got an interesting proposition where you've got to question what the value is of having a recruiter in that process.
Do you know any companies doing this well? And any technology names we can look at, or you can
in terms of building it or in terms of using it? I think
in terms of suppliers.
Yeah, if we're talking about suppliers, I will send out the Cube example, which is what Michael's doing. I think the other test technology you want to have a look at, I wrote about it about 2 years ago, but they've just got around to winning the Best Innovative Startup Competition Recruiting Innovation Summit. Smarterer. Have a look at what Smarterer are doing. That's smart with an ER on the end. Smarterer devise crowdsourced, crowd-based knowledge assessments. Very, very simple. They've now broken it down that based on crowdsourcing roles, they can identify 10 questions which people could compete between one another, which challenges them over where they sit in terms of their capability. So Smarterer is another company you want to go away and have a look at.
Okay. Finally, you come to websites. You talk about a few websites and that are putting freelancers in connection with hiring managers and perhaps might be a threat to contract work.
I actually think this is probably the biggest threat a lot of agencies face for years, and I really don't hear anyone talking in the market about it coming, and I think it needs to be an agenda to say this is coming. How's it threatening us? How's it impacting? So is it
already happening in the US, you're saying, and it's going to come over here? Or
no, it's happening here.
It's happening here too.
It's happening here, and a lot of them emerged from here.
Right. Okay.
And this pattern of practice has been increasing over a number of years. We've basically got a convergence of certain things at this time. We've got new work that needs doing, new stuff that needs doing. We've got freelancers who have those skills, who are wanting to actually specialise in some of what they're doing. So we've got freelancers who are doing that, and then we've got and they're putting their skill available. We've got the social referencing, so very much like, if you think about it, you know how eBay works. So if you're a seller on eBay, I can go back and see your past transactions, see what people think of you. You can't be shambolic for very long. You can't take people's money and not ship it or anything else. So I've got a very clear social guarantees, and also my transactions within eBay, as they are within PayPal, they're insured by the network to keep you there. In effect, they're saying, if this is a scam, whatever it is, we'll pay you. We'll sort you. We'll get you paid.
So it's a shop of candidates.
No,
it's a shop of freelancers.
No, it's not. You have to stop thinking about the platforms in a traditional way. It isn't about jobs, it's about work. Okay. So people are bidding for work. So what will happen? Yeah, what will happen in so instead of saying I want a contractor and I'll pay them $150 an hour for and the work will take about 50 or 60 hours, could be open-ended. What I'll do is say, instead of that, instead of needing this job doing, I'll just put up a job of work like, I need a website built, or I need a mobile application built. Increasingly talking to them, there's loads of things like social media content going on there. I need blog posts writing, or I need an iPhone app built, whatever it is. You put the job on concept up, people will come in and pitch and say, yeah, you know what, I can do that. What we're also got in it is matching technology, because it's very similar to recruiting, in which you're putting in some work, it will match and come back and say, well, these freelancers have these skills. So you can then enter into conversations and agree that a period of time for that work to be done. That work is then conducted by the freelancer. You have some controls. So, for instance, in 3Desk and Elance, if somebody's working for you, they log into your project. Every 7 minutes, you get a screenshot of their screen. You also have collaborative tools in there, so you can go in and work with them and hold meetings and things like that. So it really is saying, actually, where is the currency? The currency is in the work, not the contractor. That's what's being traded, and they're getting paid through the system. So it's quite different. And these organisations, these boards, are growing exponentially in terms of what they're doing. Because the other thing we've got at the moment, which makes this time unique against historical time, is that people actually have the technology in their houses, usually better technology than they have at work. So, and with a number of apps. So, you know, to do certain things, like if you wanted to build a website or do something, it would have been a desktop publishing person or a graphic designer would need to design that work. Now, you don't need to. You'll go find yourself 50 designers who will pitch for that work.
Right, okay. So, a lot of this news doesn't sound, from the US, doesn't sound too good for third-party recruiters.
I think everything. It's like everything we look at, Louis.
Yeah.
Everything we look at is we can either do the Nero thing, which is the usual purpose. You know, we can stick our hand down and say, stand in front of the ocean and say, go back, sea of change, and say, go back, don't come. Or we can take the ostrich maneuver and stick a head in the sand and say, it's not happening, or our business is doing fine. I think one of the topics I've heard talked about recently, which was really interesting, which is the time to change your business model and the way that you do things, and to experiment when things are going really well. Because when things are going really well, you will change things because it makes them better rather than you have to. You know, it's a good time
to do it properly and money to invest.
Yeah, you know, so I mean, there was if I give you a real simple example from politics, maybe the time we should have started thinking as governments and local authorities and all the rest of it, in spending our money in a sensible way, was when there was plenty of it about 5 or 6 years ago. You know, then, whereas at the moment we're having to make dramatic austerity moves and hope that they work when we haven't got the luxury of failure. So if you look at it, that's a fairly dramatic economic example that's been talked about a lot, you know, as a global thing, that we're making austerity moves, but the austerity moves are the last roll of the dice for a lot of us. You know, and I see this exactly the same thinking towards innovation within recruiting process, that people say, oh, it hasn't affected us yet, therefore we're not even going to think about it. So new technology, new sourcing, new ways of doing things.
What are you hearing from third-party recruiters in the US then, or what are they doing to adapt to these changes? And perhaps the question is, what can we learn over here?
Well, I think over here,
if there is anything to be learned.
Well, there's a few things. There's a few things. You know, I think what we're seeing is actually the UK market, from a third-party agency point of view, is going to get closer to the US market. The US market consists of sole operators or small firms for the most part,
right,
who work collaboratively on split fees and stuff like that, who increase resources to be able to pitch against the big guys. So what you have is either giants who are running the RPOs, the vendor managed services, that kind of thing, similar to what we have over here, or it's 1, 2, 3 man operations where people are independent recruiters. We've actually seen that pretty much everywhere else that we've been to, apart from here. Here it's been about firms, and we have a lot more medium-sized firms, recruiting firms that have 200, 300 employees, maybe based in multiple locations. But
our customers, there's a huge range of sizes.
yeah,
right from small bands, through the medium size, right to the huge size. So
yeah. But to be honest, if you think about it, Louis, you know, you're beginning to know this space. If you
I try
to talk to somebody who was a recruiter from their house, as a candidate or a hiring company, a potential candidate, potential hiring company, there would have been no credibility. It would have been quite unusual historically. Now, if somebody is working from their home, they have the technology to do that. You probably wouldn't even know they were in their house, but it wouldn't surprise you to discover an independent working recruiter, right? It's a normal business model. You could also understand why someone might do that because of the potential level of earning and the life-work balance. So I think we're seeing a lot more of that. We're beginning to see more and more people who are becoming independent or very small firm recruiters. And we're also seeing the growth of RPO. Now, the thing is, RPO is growing because companies are wanting to bring recruiting in-house. RPO is growing. Hiring managers in-house are taking on more responsibility, some of which is going away. Who's getting squeezed? The agencies are getting squeezed to have a look at what they're doing. And you know, this is the real time before it gets too dramatic to start thinking about, well, actually, the market's going to be disrupted in this way. Therefore, how do we change things? You know, I've been speaking to somebody recently who owns a extremely large European executive search firm. One of the biggest firms in Europe, actually. And what they're saying to me is, it's not getting too dramatic yet. We know it's in percentage points, and it's getting harder to do deals, and more deals are not coming to us. They're doing some of their own stuff. So we're losing some market share that way. But we really feel that technology and the social landscape and the way in which candidates and clients are working, which has made the agency market a luxury, they're starting to invest in recruiting technology because they're really feeling, well, actually technology is totally disrupting what we do. And that's here, you know, that's here. So I'd say to any agency recruiters listening in, smell the coffee, you know, accept it. You might actually be running quite good desks and making okay money at them. I accept that, but it's a good time for you to go back and say, right, let's have a look and let's see what we can change. Could we charge for work? You know, could we provide work? Could we charge for work rather than charging for placement? Maybe, maybe not, but let's go away and examine these things.
I think a lot of what you're talking about was we discussed in your white paper recently, without meaning to plug it.
Yeah. Well, plug away. A lot of people are reading it.
Well,
so.
Meaning to plug it, perhaps, but rather than go over that again, we did discuss this in detail in another hangout quite a while back, and and the white paper is there to download. And Bill, you do go into some of the quite radical ideas on what agencies might do. And recently you were talking about not getting paid commission. I think that caused one of our larger discussions on
right, one of the largest discussions. It was quite interesting. Yeah, depending who the person is as to whether they thought it should get paid commission. But I think one of the other things that I
think you were accused of socialism by someone.
By various
back to politics.
Socialism and tree hugging, and I've been called a traitor to the recruitment industry and everything else. You know, the more that people are complaining about me, the happier I am. Really, it's not deliberately provoking controversy, but I think we actually really need to think about it. I think when I talked about LinkedIn becoming a sharing platform, Mr. LinkedIn and Matt Alder and everyone else sent me stuff in and said, you can't generalise about social media platforms, that's not going to happen. When I talked about mobile, people using mobile to go with LinkedIn, at the time it was only about 3 or 4%. Everyone said, no, we're not seeing it. That's not where we get the traffic from. It's now standing on about 30, 40%. So I think you have to ask the questions and try and make the changes before you need to make the changes. That was one example of it. But there's an agency that or a technology company who I met with, who now have an offshore recruiting company, and what they charge for, this is quite an interesting model, they charge for sourcing and introducing candidates for interview, and having qualified them, and they're charging between $25 and $50 a candidate. And then what you do with them once you've got them is up to you.
Well, okay. That's an interesting model.
It's another model, you know, but in a very short space of time, in about 4 months, they've picked up 100 clients who are paying them for candidates.
So you're sort of paying as you go.
Well, pay as you go, but I think what's actually happened there is they've looked at it and said, well, okay, if you're hiring 1 in 10 candidates, you're paying us $50 a candidate. You're actually going to pay us $500 for us to source someone. That's just about right. However, if what you're doing is paying us money, you're then picking up the recruitment pro. In comparison, we do a bit of sourcing, you pick up the candidate, you do a bit of that work, and we're charging you $5,000 for that, $10,000 for that. And you start saying, well, hang on a minute, really, the only thing I should be paying for is the sourcing the candidate.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, it's a bit quiet today, but someone did tweet, Carl tweeted, developerauction.com.
Yeah, I thought you might do that. Let me tell you about developerauction.com.
Yep.
Because this is a really, this is another site, and it was in my list of places that I thought was. I think Carl might work for developerauction.com, by the way. So Carl,
Purple Squirrel Recruitment's his logo. So.
Yeah, Purple Squirrel Recruitment. That's the one he finds the purple squirrels. What Developer Auction does is you blind bid for developers. So you blind bid for work. You say you put some work up, a developer or a job up. Developer comes in and says, "I would take this work." You go, "I would do this work." You then tell them how much you would pay to get a particular job done, and then the developer will choose to talk to you based on your bid price. Whoever wins the auction.
And is this permanent, is it, Carl was saying?
It's a mix. Well, it's a mix. You can do it for permanent jobs, but also developer auction, you do for what you bid for work as well. So,
okay.
And it can also be contract, you know. So there isn't a fixed model in terms of what the terms are, but there's a load of stuff you can put out there, you know. And there's lots of these sites developing. So from a work point of view, there's Workana, who are based in Brazil. They're part of Evenbase. Evenbase have invested in them. That's Workana, ANA. I had a 2-hour conference call with them. They came up with some really interesting data on how many people are using their site. You've got Elance here, which I think we all know well. There's 3Desk, which is a new one. There is I think there's probably about 10 of these work auction sites. The difference now is somebody pitches for your work, you can then go back and see their portfolio. You can connect in the system with people who they've done work before and check them out. You're taking no risk. And from a freelancer's point of view, they're taking no risk because they're paid through the platform, of which the platform takes a percentage rather than the agency. And because it's a technology play with scale rather than a person play with scale, what you're finding is that they're able to provide it a lot more effectively and considerably cheaper, which totally reduces your cost per hire.
Okay. Thank you, Tim's just down. Tim Con. I can't pronounce your surname. Sorry, Tim. Has just downloaded the white paper, so I suppose Tim might be watching.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Tim. I actually delivered just for your reference. I delivered that white paper from transaction to relation recruitment. That was my presentation at the California Staffing Professionals. That was
right. Okay.
one of the keynotes that I spoke about and said, right, you've heard it before, Louis, so you know the story. But it was, again, something I was talking about, and because the nature of the event meant it was a lot more dialogue. I'm going to tell you a massive lesson I learned in California, because we're coming to the end of the show. I think this is an important one for anyone. I want to give a shout out. He's probably not listening in, but I want to give a shout out for a guy called Richard Essien. Richard Essien owns a big staffing firm in the US. That's ESSIEN. Richard, I don't think you'll mind me saying, is so old that he has an award named after him that they give out to industry professionals. You know, he's one of these people who've been around for a very long time. He looks quite old. He walks with sticks and so on. I was running my social media.
He can join the old school. He can join the old school recruiter group on Facebook.
Yeah, he certainly should. Certainly should do. So Richard came in, and anyone else should join the old school recruiter group as well, by the way, and come and share some war stories. Richard came into my session in California. He was walking on 2 sticks, and walking like someone who is in their senior years. He came in and sat down. I looked around the room. Obviously, most of the people in the recruiting and social sourcing session were, and this was a conference which had 2 sections. So there was an owner's section and a practitioner consultant section. He walked into the consultant session. Most of the people in there were early 20s, probably. You know, I was expecting to be the oldest person in the room. He came in and sat down. I very nearly went up to him and said, "Excuse me, but have you got the wrong room? Like, the legal session is next door. You might want to go in there." As the session started, he asked me probably 2 or 3 of the better questions I've ever been asked, in terms of not just challenging and looking for qualification. He asked for, couldn't fully understand your accent. Can you send me a list of all the links and all that kind of stuff? He also had a look at, asked for the link to download the white paper. And he went away and he came up to me at the end and said, "You know, I've been coming to these for about 100 years. That's the best session. That's the most useful session I've ever been to. If you can send the list over to us." So it was just really something for me that said, you know, when we think, oh, social media, social recruiting, it's for the kids, it's a young man's game. Very easy for us to stereotype that, and we can relearn and say, actually, anyone can come and learn this. And if you're a good recruiter and you're a good networker, all you're doing is you're doing online what you've always done offline.
Yeah. Pub networking.
And you do it on steroids. It's like being on steroids. It's going out and finding the volume and finding people. So I think there's, you know, it all. We've talked a little bit about technology and assessment, where that's going, where the role of the recruiter is going, and the challenges coming from work. I think as recruitment businesses, we should be looking at all this. We should be aware that this is where the scale competition is coming from. If hiring managers are more involved in the process and they get more involved with agencies, that's fantastic. You know, there's still very much a role for agencies in the pot, although that's changing. I think we do have to look at our pricing model and our servicing models and actually be able to say, what do you want? We can give you a low-cost option, which is about sourcing an introduction, not a lot else, no guarantees, none of the other stuff we put in. You pay us that for introduction, or we could do the executive search, we could do retained stuff, we could do a mid-level search. If you only want to pay us £2,000, we can offer you a different service for that. Or if you want us to do work and organise and pay the contractors ourselves to do the work by running a freelance hub, we can facilitate that. So I think there's so many different opportunities that we can either sit around, we can either say, this ain't going to happen, and do the Nero thing. We can sit around and sulk about it. I think one of the problems is because recruiters feel under pressure a little bit at the moment, under siege. It's very easy to come up with reasons why, oh yeah, but the old model's best. This is why this is best. This is why this is best. It's very easy to be very defensive about it. I think if we're open-minded about it, say, actually, there's a lot we can learn from using these new technologies in a remote way, using assessments. You know, set up a game that enables you to hire accountants. guess what? It's going to be a hell of a lot more interesting than your static website you have at the moment.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, you know,
you,
these are the things we're talking about. That you could do all this kind of recruiting in any of those channels. When we look at, I've got another paper out at the moment that I'll put up on gamification. Have a look at it. I've been looking at the mechanics of games and how they apply in the recruiting process.
I'll put that on the recruitment goodies section. Doesn't have to be a colleague white.
Yeah, please do that. There's two. There's that one. There's also one on social referrals and social referral technology for Rollpoint. So go and have a look at that. So
okay, yeah,
you know,
I remember that one.
I'll
put them up.
I think it's a really interesting time. And much as I see recruiters being under threat in some respects, I also see us having massive opportunity if we lead the market a little bit.
So it's a time of innovation and excitement, perhaps, as well. So.
It's a time of experimentation, right? Most innovation is actually a copy. Anything that's best practice is a copy of what someone else has done, and there's not necessarily any harm in that. But there is an opportunity, and it should be a time of constant implementation. Always be in this thinking. It's not just for technology companies. If you're a recruitment firm, always think we're reinventing, we're looking at what we're doing, we're changing things, we're adding bits, especially when we're doing that when we're not under the financial pressure to do it. And we need to adopt the attitude. You know, I love the Google attitude to innovation, which is that you fail often. If you don't fail, it's a disciplinary issue. If you don't fail at some stuff sometimes, because it means you're not trying hard enough or pushing the envelope. Fail often, fail fast, fail cheap.
Okay, and on that note,
yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I think I'd just like to mention before we go, unless you had anything more to say, the June the 18th Technology Showcase event with UK Recruiter. That, if you're interested in recruitment technology, worth going along to.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be talking some stuff there at the end of the event.
Some stuff, yes. So, something. We're not quite sure yet, but probably technology trends, something like that, Bill, or cool tools, something like that.
We'll be talking about that, but we'll be talking about something that's worth turning up for.
Certainly. I mean, there's a lot of other good speakers there as well, but also if you're looking to buy software, there's a few CRMs and some other vendors there in the UK sector. So
yeah, Tom, I always think those events are good. You know, Louise puts a good event on, so shout out for UK Recruiter.
Yeah, and it's agency focus, which is quite a rare thing.
Yeah, so I think there's two things with it. It's agency focus, but it's also an opportunity that if you're not in the market for buying, you should go and see what other people are doing, so you can put pressure on your incumbent supplier. You can go back to your current supplier and say, right, you know, we've got a contract with you for the next 3 years. We've seen this feature that somebody else is doing. We'd like you to integrate it or think about it. I also think it's a good time to have a look, when you can have a look at the vendors side by side. It's a good time for you to start thinking about who are the suppliers I should know.
Yeah, I agree. Worth going on, and as I said, some good talks as well in that area going on there. So it's not purely a exhibition; it's actually speed pitching. I think
speed pitching goes on.
Yeah,
yeah. Obviously, it's actually stolen from Reconverse. I'm going to be in. I'm going to be in Dublin as well on Monday. We've got now 130 recruiters signed up, which is about half agency for True Dublin. Still space for that if you want to look up the website. It's €49, which includes breakfast, lunch, and beer. And
how many?
And a number of beers. We've got some good sponsors for that event. And then I'm going to be in Moscow on Wednesday. So I'll be at True Moscow. So
Postcard from Russia is the next one.
There's a lot going on. Maybe we'll talk about recruiting in Eastern Europe or in the Far East.
That would be interesting.
The next hangout. Yeah, no problem for that. But thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. And please do feel to get in touch if you want to join in future, participate as a guest. All are welcome. So, and thank you, Bill.
Thanks for tuning in.